The high-grade Universal Century 020 Gym, a model of the famed Federation Grunt from all the way back in the original Mobile Suit Gundam. It's been half of a half-century since its release, and while aspects of it does come off heavily dated, the very fact that this is still the most modern update to the classic gym from the 80s makes this kit quite fascinatingly relevant to talk about. Hey, I'm Sadi and welcome to Sadi's Tea. The HGUC gym has been something I've been meaning to own for quite some time now. It's not that I haven't had the opportunity to do so, far from it. I've built this kit with friends and handled it around at events so many times, and with how often I see this kit in stores, there really wasn't any sense of urgency to fuel my desires in getting this kit. If anything, this is the kit I have the most experience with. With only 2 polystyrene runners and a single polycap runner inside of the box, the humble gym is as simple as it can be. While there are some fascinating things to see within the manual like specs, painted product shots, a color guide, and even Hajime Kotoki's line art for this version of the gym, with the model only having 12 clearly illustrated instructions to follow, it's a brisk building process that should be familiar to those who have built late 90s to early 2000s kits. It's a straightforward yet effective method of having 2 main pieces per segment, with polycaps on the inside for joints and occasional bits of extra colored plastic for detailing. It works with the gym's simpler, blocky shapes, though does come at the cost of having seam lines riddled all throughout the kit. There are segments that look fine, with the side of the body having a channel for the panel lining, the feet being relatively solid, and the bicep armor and the shoulder pads are all molded as one piece, so all you really have to look out for are mold lines there. And of course, the simpler engineering also doesn't really allow for much flexibility, with the kit mainly having 90-degree hinges all around, ball joints with limited circumduction, with the most flexible joints being the simple 360 rotations on the shoulders and the waist swivel, which also has this interesting side-to-side system where you can see the internal core block detail. Actually, the waist probably has the most intricate system of all the joints. The front piece is molded entirely as one, meaning that it doesn't flex, so it moves via a slight polycap hinge, and since it is a peg, you can actually turn it side to side a bit for posing. Overall, not a complete brick, this was honestly quite standard, if not a bit more flexible for the time, but we've truly come a long way with plastic model engineering. Completing the build, of course, we have to finish snapping together the weapons, which is a modest set that gives us a shield with the L-shaped ball joint connector that lets you plug it into the 3mm ports on either arm side or the backpack for storage. Never been a fan of this adapter connection. The movement axis gets kinda weird, and when you get the gym to hold the bar on the shield, it ends up looking quite awkward. A faux beam saber hilt used mainly for storage, it doesn't even have the 1.5 hole for beams, with a separate activated beam saber that you have to paint yourself. And finally, a simple beam spray gun made out of 3 pieces. Of course, that would go into the extra right trigger finger hand, and we can't leave out the left hand, so we also get an extra left open hand, which is quite well detailed, if a bit soft in sculpt. With the model fully completed, we can finally take a good look at the HGUC gym, which is unsurprisingly quite great. The classic gym has never really been a difficult design to translate into model form. With a simple silhouette and the easy color blocking, the completed straight-built model looks pretty good. The sharper and more compact geometry of Kotoki's styling makes the model nicely modernized, and I like how tastefully sparse and uncluttered the detailing is. Classic, some may even call it anime accurate, yet still carries a fair bit of flourishes to really make the model pop. I especially like how the visor was done in clear plastic, something that's actually quite new to HGUC for the time. While there is nothing to see behind it, there is still some details molded onto the clear visor, which is nice, but that also makes me question a fair bit more about the color accuracy of the kit. For the most part, it's very solid. Some of the colors to be filled in, like the yellow for the Vulcans and some gray for the internal backpack segment. I ran out during filming, so oops. They make sense and honestly would still probably be faults that exist nowadays, but I do question how they weren't able to provide a color piece for the chest center, instead requiring you to use a black sticker, and while that's perfectly fine for me, I still would have preferred proper separation, or hell, it doesn't even need to be a coal-molded black piece, as the gray plastic would have been fine enough. There's even still some space for it on the runners, so I find that a bit odd. And another oddity for me is, well, the ankles, as... Actually, it might be better to delve into a bit of Gunpla history for this one. Releasing quite literally just a month after this kit was the HGUC 021 RX-782 Gundam, which, if you can't tell by the sculpt, are incredibly similar. Though internally, the Gundam actually has just a fair bit more of an edge to the GIM. The Gundam has a separated ankle joint that goes into a polycap instead of being molded onto the rest of the shin. And on the shoulders of the Gundam, they placed polycaps on the inside of the torso, allowing for extra butterfly movement. I find it fascinating that despite sharing CAD files, well, at least I think they're using CAD files, the designers made the GIM a lot less feature-heavy than the Gundam. One could say lore accurate, and that's the comedically hilarious way of looking at it. But product-wise, maybe it's to make the extra 200 yen worth it for the Gundam, or they just wanted to keep the GIM simpler for a cheaper price, friendly for army building. Which leads us to the inevitable mention of the HGUC 191 RX-782 Gundam Revive Kit, an updated version of the classic Gundam in the HGUC line, and the inevitable question of, why didn't the GIM end up following suit? Again, the GIM is now a 25-year-old model kit, and it's not like they've ever stopped making 1/144th scale 782s, not like they even want to stop. Oh my god, please stop! Think about it like this. Around the time of the release of the 782 Revive, we were going to enter a transitional period where you can tell Bandai focused even more into making their Gunpla these intricate and posable action figures. But before that, we went through the HG Unicorn era, which gave us some awesome modern high-grade renditions of designs we've yet to see in the HGUC line, which especially encompasses the different grunt suits, which of course means GIM kits that I'd love to take a look at in the future. So it's surprising that they didn't end up reusing any of the old assets from, say, the GIM 2 and making a quick and easy GIM Revive. I think the culprit for the lack of the Revive may have been the cancelled real grade GIM. Bandai must have not been confident to have the GIM head on the G30 body. That being said, we did get a lot of alternate universe GIMs, like the Thunderbolt version. Would have made a great starting blueprint for a Revive, honestly, but it's also Thunderbolt. There's that. A lot of people's favorite, the GIM from the Build series, a bit too stylized for a Universal Century shelf, although then again, Revive 782, but is an awesome kit regardless. There's also Miss Identity Crisis over here from Jquux, stop pretending to be my goat. And of course, the Gundam the Origin versions, which I call the Origims. It's the most modern GIM we currently have, besides the Quacks version. And I'm not a fan. The Origin kits are definitely superior models in terms of color accuracy, flexibility, accessories, everything. Although I just never really liked the Origin Gundam's proportions, especially towards the upper half. So with the addition of the GIM command elements, the design was just too much to be the one-year war GIM that I wanted. Sure, you tried to loop in their other renditions of the GIMs of that era, but with how vastly different they are, I wouldn't have minded if we just retconned what the GIM's head is supposed to actually look like. Like, I don't know, maybe base it off of the Cold Districts type. That's my custom idea, don't you dare! Which reminds me, very recently, a bootleg company tried their hands on making a classic style GIM by kit bashing together certain parts of the different Origims and even the shoulders of the Origin Gundam for that smooth slope the Origin kits fucking hate. Other than the fact that the GIM 2 colors makes my eyes somewhat hurt, which is honestly not even fair, my eyesight is just terrible. It's a decent attempt into making a classic style GIM, so if you could stomach buying knockoffs, it's an option for you out there, just not something exactly for me. What I want is just a clean and simple GIM, not to the extent of being fully anime accurate, but one that when you see is very clearly the classic GIM, which is what we get from the HGUC kit anyways. Not to say that the GIM is still far better than all of these. I myself am quite tempted to do a fair bit of customizing to add in some of that 90s era panel lining and extending the limbs to make the kit look overall less stocky, but as even the base model alone, it just looks like the straight up GIM and I love it for it. Although my customizer impulse does find itself in a bit of a duel with the worms in my brain that cares a bit too much about scale. At 12.5 centimeters, the kit perfectly stands at 1/144th scale, makes it look great next to a lot of other 1/144th scale models, and some Japanese N-scale soldiers also look pretty great. Although, it does feel like there's just something missing. I've had the same feeling when I did my GIM command video a while back, and just whenever I take a look at a grunt suit, I feel like there's just not enough. There needs to be more of them. I was honestly tempted to buy a few more GIMs during the making of this video because one of them really isn't going to cut it. This kit is very much the quintessential army builder, a simple throw-around grunt that doesn't hurt the bank too much to get multiples of. And in highlighting that fact, it also brings me to an opinion I've been wanting to share for ages now and why I've been so eager to review this guy. I find the HGUC gym to be one of the greatest Gunpla out there, especially if you're a beginner. Back in high school, I had friends who got back into building and even started their journeys with the HGUC gym. One of them even almost got confiscated by my statistics teacher, that poor thing. There was something so specifically enticing about it. The classic retro robot aesthetic, and of course the price tag that made it a great choice for someone who doesn't wish to indulge too far into a new hobby. The final product is far from perfect. It was created during a time when the realities of plastic modeling meant quite a fair bit of seam lines, color correcting, and range limitations. I'm sure a lot of people nowadays would be dramatic and call this terrible, incredibly outdated, and just bad. Yet none of my friends ever really minded the issues, because beginner hobbyists aren't concerned over the minute details. They just love the fact that they had the gym and that it would be really easy to get more of them, be it to build an army or to try out new ways to customize their Gunpla. I don't want to be dramatic and say that this encapsulates everything that this hobby has to offer, but there's just something so charming to me about the authenticity of this kit. It knows what it really is, a simple model kit, a fun, buildable, some people treat it as a toy that becomes the canvas for so many creative opportunities. And that's why to me, it's one of the greats. It's nothing flashy, it's nothing gimmicky, it's the gym, just a simple model kit of one of the original beloved grunt suits, with just the right amount of everything to be perfectly and simply awesome.